I want to emphasize this just because every once in a while, you may not know what your members of Congress are doing for you. These three guys right here are standing up for young people. We need senators to do the same. The bill that they voted on, the bill that I proposed, here's what it does. It takes the $80 billion the banks currently get, and it uses it to make Pell Grants larger. It uses those funds to focus on innovative efforts to help students not only go to college, but to graduate. And just as important, these savings will allow us to make the largest investment ever in the most underappreciated asset in our education system, and that is community colleges like Hudson Valley, which is so essential for the future of our young people. So we hope to improve on this bill in the Senate and go even further on behalf of students. Ending this unwarranted subsidy for the big banks is a no-brainer for folks everywhere, except some folks in Washington. In fact, we're already seeing special interests rallying to save this giveaway. And the large banks, many who have benefited from taxpayer bailouts during the financial crisis, are lobbying to keep this easy money flowing. That's exactly the kind of special interest effort that has succeeded before, and we can't allow it to succeed this time. This is exactly the kind of waste that leaves people wary of government, leaves our country straddled with trillions of dollars of deficits and debt with little to show for it. And that's why I went to Washington, to change that kind of stuff. And I look forward to winning this fight in the Senate, just as we won it in the House, and signing this bill into law. Now, another key to strengthening education, entrepreneurship, and innovation in communities like Troy is to harness the full power of the Internet. And that means faster and more widely available broadband, as well as rules to ensure that we preserve the fairness and openness that led to the flourishing of the Internet in the first place. So today, FCC Chairman Julius Genachowski is announcing a set of principles to preserve an open Internet in which all Americans can participate and benefit. And I'm pleased that he's taking that step. That's an important role that we can play, laying the ground rules to spur innovation. That's the role of government, to provide investment that spurs innovation and also to set up common sense ground rules to ensure that there's a level playing field for all comers who seek to contribute their innovations. And we have to think about the networks we need today, but also the networks we need tomorrow. That's why I've proposed grants through the National Science Foundation and through the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, which helped develop the Internet, to explore the next communications breakthroughs, whatever they may be. That's why I've appointed the first ever Chief Technology Officer, charged with looking at ways technology can spur innovations that help government do a better and more efficient job. We also have to strengthen our commitment to research, including basic research, which has been badly neglected for decades. That's always been one of the secrets of America's success, putting more and more money into research to create the next great inventions, the great technologies that will then spur further economic growth. The fact is, though, basic research doesn't always pay off immediately. It may not pay off for years. When it does, the rewards are often broadly shared, enjoyed by those who bore at cost, but also by those who didn't pay a dime for that basic research. That's why the private sector generally underinvests in basic science. That's why the public sector must invest instead. While the risks may be large, so are the rewards for our economy and our society. I mean, understand, it was basic research in the photoelectric effect that would one day lead to solar panels. It was basic research in physics that would eventually produce the CAT scan. The calculations of today's GPS satellites, they're based on basic research, equations Einstein put on paper more than a century ago. Nobody knew they'd lead to GPS, but they understood that as we advance our knowledge, that is what is going to help advance our societies. When we fail to invest in research, we fail to invest in the future. Yet, since the peak of the space race in the 1960s, our national commitment to research and development has steadily fallen as a share of our national income. And that's why I set a goal of putting a full 3% of our gross domestic product, our national income, into research and development, surpassing the commitment we made when President Kennedy challenged this nation to send a man to the moon. Towards this goal, the Recovery Act has helped achieve the largest increase in basic research in history. This month, the National Institutes of Health will award more than $1 billion in research grants through the Recovery Act focused on what we can learn from the mapping of the human genome in order to treat diseases that affect millions of Americans, from cancer to heart disease. And I also want to urge Congress to fully fund the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, because since its creation, it has been the source of cutting-edge breakthroughs, from that early internet to stealth technology. So as we invest in the building blocks of innovation, from the classroom to the laboratory, it's also essential that we have competitive and vibrant markets that promote innovation as well. Education and research help foster new ideas, but it takes fair and free markets to turn those ideas into industries. My budget finally makes the research and experimentation tax credit permanent. This is a tax credit that helps companies afford the often high costs of developing new ideas, new technologies, new products, which means new jobs. And this tax incentive returns $2 to the economy for every $1 we spend. Time and again, I've heard from leaders from Silicon Valley to the Tech Valley about how important it is. I've also proposed reducing to zero the capital gains tax for investments in small or startup businesses, because small businesses are innovative businesses. They produce 13 times more patents per employee than large companies do. Now, these tax incentives will spur entrepreneurship, but there are other important steps to foster markets that value and promote risk takers and idea makers, who've always been the center of our success. That's why it's essential that we enforce trade laws and work with our trading partners to open up markets abroad, that we reform and strengthen our intellectual property system, that we sustain our advantage as a place that draws and welcomes the brightest minds from all over the world, and that we unlock sources of credit and capital which have been in short supply as a result of the financial crisis. Now, there are some other fundamental barriers to innovation and economic growth that we're going to have to tackle in order to ensure American leadership and prosperity continues into the 21st century. For as a nation, we face enormous challenges, from ending our dependence on foreign oil to finally providing all Americans with quality, affordable health care. We've got to attack these challenges to create a climate for innovation, and innovation can then be an important part of how we meet these challenges. So let me give you an example. Healthcare costs. They leave our small businesses at a disadvantage when competing with our large businesses, and they leave our large businesses at a disadvantage when competing around the world. We will never know the enormity of the costs of our economy to the countless Americans unable to become entrepreneurs or to start a small business, to follow their dreams, because they're afraid of losing their health insurance.